How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the AAA Podcast. I'm Rowan, of course, and joined once again by the wonderful Anthony Adams. Today's
What's
episode
up?
is just going to be a little catch up. Obviously, we haven't made an episode in a long time, so just kind of some updates on our lives, where we're at now. Yeah, Anthony, you want to start us off?
Sure. See, since the last podcast, done with baseball, done with college baseball, graduated, thank God. Took 5 years. Um, and then now I moved to Fort Worth, Texas. I'm an assistant strength and conditioning coach at TCU, helping out with baseball and probably some other Olympic sports, and then helping out at Coach Dakin's private facility at Ideal Sports Performance, where we work with kids who are middle school, high school, college, every once in a while some pro athletes who train out of there. Um, so yeah, moved to a different state. And what about you, Rowan?
Yeah, was our last podcast with Zach right before I graduated? Was it that long ago?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
I think it
So I'm
was.
also
I think
done
you. I
with
think you
baseball.
graduated already
I just
because
graduated.
it was the summer,
Okay. I'm
or
still done
no, it
with
was when you were
baseball.
in Boston. I think. I don't know.
Oh, I do remember that. I'm also no longer in Boston. I now live in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm a GA at Cleveland State University. I've also kind of phased out of the physical therapy stuff. I'm more into sports performance and strength and conditioning now. So I work with a handful of teams at CSU, and then I'm also working towards my master's. I have one more year of that. And then, yeah, right now over the summer, I'm just working with women's basketball, which is one of the main sports at CSU, just helping out with my boss with that. And then getting ready for this second year where I'll have five teams to myself. So exciting stuff.
What's it like working with five teams and trying to get your masters at the same time?
Yeah, it was a lot. Last year I had upwards of seven teams at one time. So it was got pretty hectic. School luckily wasn't like the hardest semester I've had. It was all pretty much review stuff, pretty intro level classes for the master's program, so that was nice. But yeah, it's a lot. You kind of find ways and tricks to kind of get multiple things done at the same time. Um, I generally just hang out at the school all day, and in my free time in between teams, I'm doing homework, reading stuff, watching videos that I want to watch, just trying to keep learning. But then, yeah, the most learning and just happens from the application aspect of working with so many athletes. I think I have 150 student athletes that I'm doing the programming for, so you just kind of you kind of go, you get it done. Not everything's your best work, but you kind of learn from each session and each program you write. So
So how'd you go from because you're at Champion, right? It was like strength conditioning and a little bit of PT stuff where they had both in the same place. What made you first want to go into collegiate strength and conditioning and get your master's, and how did that come about?
yeah, well, very early on at Champion, because I was there for a strength and conditioning internship, and that was kind of just wanting to get more experience before I went to PT school. But very early on, just talking to the my boss there, he just kind of was pointing out how I remind him a lot of him, and he came into the same kind of situation, wanting to be a PT, and then ended up just falling in love with the strength and conditioning aspect. And just kind of jokingly, he mentioned that if you were to put money on it, he would bet that by the end of the summer, I would be kind of in that same boat. And yeah, champions. Honestly, it's a pretty split PT versus just like private gym setting. It just kind of all exists in the same area, similar to like how Driveline and with Dylan was, except it's more heavy on like the PT side. There's like six PTs there. Um, but yeah, it was just like getting to see uh, uh, what they did was really cool and really interesting, but I kind of started to realize that that setting doesn't exist a lot of places. It's very hard to get into a setting like that. And for the most part, we're going through PT school and the early years of being a PT is going to be a lot more monotonous and a lot more of just the um, for lack of a better phrase, like boring clients. And I really wanted to work with
Yeah.
athletes, and that's something that I was an athlete myself, and I'm really passionate about. And then so just like as the summer went on, I got to work with more people on the strength and conditioning side and work with a lot of athletes that were home for the summer. It just started to reveal itself more that like that is really what I enjoyed. Um, and so when it came time to kind of start maybe applying to PC schools finally, I was now already living in Cleveland and looking for a job just for, I don't know, the next couple months up to a year. Um, and the CSU job opened up and it was almost like a sign. Like that was literally what I was looking for, an excuse to not have to apply to PT schools and just keep working in strength and conditioning. And to get to do it at a D1 level with a bunch of athletes that are my age, like that was the dream position. So yeah, just hopped on that instantly and worked pretty hard to get it. But yeah, here we are 9 months later. So
Yeah. Um, what if so both of us being like Division 3 athletes, what do you see is like the biggest difference? And there's different ways to go about this, but the biggest difference between like Division 1, Division 3 athletes, whether it's skill level, buy-in, habits, because there's something that like popped out to you immediately. Obviously, well, I don't know. We kind of talked about this a little, but like there's more money, there's more resources, but what have you seen the biggest difference to be?
yeah, honestly, that was one of my big like question marks going into it because I'd worked with D1 athletes here and there, but never like a full team or a big group of them. Um, and I was surprised how similar it all kind of felt to, you know, our baseball team at PLU or other D3 teams that I've seen or interacted with. Um, a lot of my athletes aren't coming into the gym their freshman year with a lot of weight room experience. Even, transfer
Mhm.
students, juniors, seniors aren't coming in with like an incredible amount of skill and knowledge in the weight room. Some more than others. I got to get out to a handful. I try to go to as many games of my athletes as I can, but I also got to go out to a handful of practices. And obviously, they're D1 athletes for a reason. They're really good at their sport. Um, I think for the vast majority, the differences between a D3 athlete and a D1 athlete are a lot smaller than you might think. I think, maybe the game came a little bit more naturally to them, or they started excelling at the right time and got looks from the right people. Um, but yeah, those differences weren't maybe as large as I initially thought. And then as far as like the lifestyle choices, like a student athlete's a student athlete. I think for the most part,
Yeah.
they're generally not eating enough or the right foods as often as you'd want them to be. They're probably not getting enough rest as maybe you'd want as a coach. Um, and then they're all students. They have the same world they live in, where there's an assignment due that night. They have practice. They have class in the morning the next day. Um, so it's all kind of existing in the same world there. I don't see actually that much of a difference. Um, Aside from maybe the top echelon of athletes that I'm working with.
Right.
Obviously, I have a question for you following up that. You're at TCU, which is maybe a little bit more prestigious in its athletics than CSU. Um, what are the main differences you've been seeing, A, in your internship last summer, and then B, in your time there this summer?
Well, it's only been about like 3 weeks since I've been here this year, so I haven't seen like a whole lot that has been different. I'd say last summer when I was interning there, one thing that popped out, which was with specifically like the freshman volleyball group, was one we were like working out 4 days a week. So we got to see him more than we did at the Division 3 level. And we got to see him during the summer. Like in Division 3, you can't see your athletes during the summer as a strength and conditioning coach. So I feel like that changes a lot in regards to buy-in, preparing the athletes, um, and just like the frequency of sessions. One of the biggest things I saw, and I think I've mentioned this before, is like they're really good at problem solving with their body. Like if you give them a solution, something as simple as like a squat or RDL and learning that movement, um, like learning the movement. Teaching them is like fairly easy compared to like maybe a low skilled athlete, which was interesting because it was like, wait a minute, like that's why they're so good at their sport. Like they're good at movement solutions with problem solving. They have a very good proprioceptive awareness of their body. And for that reason, they're able to like get into these movements and learn them really fast. Like what was taking me up to 3 weeks to teach a Division 3 athlete like how to RDL or squat was like happening within one session for a Division 1 athlete. And like obviously, again, part of the reason was because we had more frequency of sessions. We also did like the same movement patterns every single day. So like every single day there was a squat, at least a squat hinge and a push and pull pattern. And we are doing those same patterns, just maybe a little differently throughout the whole week. So like we're doing like an RDL, single leg RDL, a glute bridge, a single leg glute bridge. Like they're all the same movement, but just different ones on each day. And so they got exposed to those movements more frequently. But like they were just able to, when I cued them, they were able to get into that movement like really fast. And so it kind of opened up again the understanding of like these Division 1 athletes have really good body awareness. And like we've there's that one summer we were interning at Driveline where we listened to how we learn to move by Rob Gray and how like self-organization is big into skill development. And I learned that those Division 1 athletes are really good at self-organizing. And sometimes like we try with low skilled athletes to like make up for those things with like games during our warm-ups and stuff. But like at the end of the day, that's something that's really hard to teach. Like teaching someone to become more self-aware of their body, like increased proprioception, which is like a very broad term. Um, it's hard to do. And like those athletes have that, and that's why they're really skilled. Um, the second thing I probably saw was that, and this could just be a culture thing at TCU in general, but the athletes were buying into whatever was being asked by them by the strength coach. Whereas like at the Division 3 level, that wasn't as apparent. Or again, it could just be a culture thing that was happening at our school. But like no matter what was asked, no matter how different the exercises or things we were doing compared to what they were doing before, like they were bought into what they were doing, no matter no matter what it was, which was cool. It was like they want to go do big things, so they're gonna do things they've never done before.
But those are actually are very interesting and things that maybe I do see and relate to a little bit. Obviously, I don't think having some elite ability in the weight room is like absolute necessity to be super good at your sport. I think it helps, and I think we want
Yeah.
that we're chasing. But I think I do see uh, the people who are generally better at their sport and a little bit more advanced on the teams that I work with tend to get things a little bit faster in the weight room. And I think that is just kind of that two-way street where they just have a better awareness of their body and maybe a better control. And so they're able to learn things a bit quicker than those who are a bit more raw and maybe don't have that awareness of body positioning and how to orient their body through space and with load. Um, and then
I think it's also dependent on the sport too.
oh,
Like,
for sure.
for example, I didn't work with a lot of endurance sports. Like, I didn't work with like cross country or rowing or I guess sports that maybe I'm wrong, but I'd consider like very output based sports where maybe there's not a lot of like reactive agility, where you're not there's not a lot of maneuverability like there is in team sports. Whereas like those athletes need a different kind of skill compared to ones that are just strictly output based. Like, um, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah, yeah, I think that.
so like I was working with volleyball, basketball, baseball, very skill based sports in a specific way, and it's like with those other endurance sports, maybe it's like how much how much proprioception do they really need? Like how much of these other spatial awareness skills do they need for their sport type of thing? So I didn't really work with those sports, so I guess it just depends on like does that at those do those athletes need those things for their sport? If that makes sense.
I agree. And I also think a small part of it is like a lot of the stuff we do in the weight room, I think, resembles a lot more closely like a very powerful and reactive movement versus like an endurance athlete doesn't do that a lot in their sport, and therefore their sport doesn't really resemble the weight training that much for the for the most part. So, even if I'm going to give, hand my distance runners a med ball, which I think could be really good, and have them, throw it against the wall in a couple variations of ways, like they don't interact with objects like that as much as a baseball player would. Where if you hand a baseball player a med
Yeah,
ball, like they're intuitively going to know how to rotate and make that look really good. Where someone,
right.
like a distance runner, doesn't have that in their day to day, so it might take them a little bit longer, and they might look a little bit more awkward performing that. Um, but going back to what you were saying before about the willingness to kind of just like accept the programs and do the work. I do find that that is very team specific and then culture specific. One of the really
Yeah,
cool things that
for
I
sure.
think I'm really glad I get to do is work with such like a broad group of athletes and a broad group of teams. And you kind of see how things kind of trickle down from the top and how, accountability not being held in one area affects all areas of the team. And then on top of that, different sports as a whole have different cultures surrounding the weight room and training. Typically, you're working with like a baseball team, they're gonna like the weight room. They're gonna want to get in the weight room. They're not gonna ask too many questions. They're just gonna do the work. Obviously, there's exceptions to that, but if you're working, with a team, um, like a track roster, or I had fencing and esports this last year. Those are teams that might not have as much weight room culture built into them holistically. And so you might get some athletes that are a bit more hesitant to kind of commit to that kind of stuff. And then on top of that, coaches who are a bit more hesitant to commit to forcing that upon their athletes. So that's been another very interesting thing I've had to play around with a lot in this last year.
Can you still see me, by the way? Sorry.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm like my computer's glitching out, like I can't see it all, but I'm just gonna keep
I can see you.
I'm gonna keep going because you can still see me and hear me. But like literally my screen is black and is glitching. Um, but yeah, no, I've definitely seen that too. Um, I think I saw it most heavily at PLU with like the women's soccer team, which I believe, I hope they forgive me if I get this wrong, but 8 straight conference um, championships. But you could just see that like the team culture that has been that the coach and the team has set like carries on with everything they do. Like not only in the weight room, but like also how they are as people in the classroom and like everything that they do and like the standards that they have is what leads to their culture in the weight room. That doesn't mean that like we can't develop it in the weight room with ourselves, but it's like if you have that leadership come from the team at first, like it makes your job so much easier because it's just a culture that has been instilled in them and that they've always been the thing the things that have gotten them their success is what's helping you out in the weight room.
For sure. And it's nice when you get a group like that because you're able to take things so much further in your given year with them. If we're looking like at the athletic academic calendar year, um, you know, it looks a lot longer than it feels. And so when you have a team that's really committed and not coming in and being hesitant and just gonna jump on board and do it, it's so fun to get to work with them because you can just go and you can give them stuff that, maybe you don't know if they're entirely ready for, but you feel comfortable trying it out with them because you know that they're gonna A, give a lot of their effort, and then B, give you a lot of honest feedback about whether they enjoyed it, whether they felt good doing it, and you can kind of adjust based on that.
What have you found because you're in a spot where like you came in to CSU as a GA and like GAs have a turnover every 2 years. So it's like some of these teams and coaches have to deal with something different, someone different every 2 years. How did you get athletes to like trust you and buy into what you're doing?
Yeah, that was something that I was originally very worried about, and I wasn't 100% sure how I was going to tackle it because it was my first time in this setting. I think one thing that helped me out a lot is I was pretty fresh off being a student athlete myself, and so I could still relate to what that experience was like. I still kind of knew the workloads and what was demanded of them. And I was very honest with them about that just up front. Um, with all my teams, I had talks at the very beginning, and I told them that I'm gonna just put all my trust in them to start. And I understand that they don't necessarily have to put their trust in me to start, but it's something that I want to develop over time. Um, and that, sorry, the timer thing just popped up. Um, and that, yeah, that I'm just going to give them everything that I have, and I hope that eventually they can kind of see the effort that I'm putting into it. And then all I'm asking for is that effort in return. Um, and then yeah, going to the coaches, I think a big part of it was just having sit downs and just talking to them and getting to know them and letting them know my background and that I'm really here to be an extension of them and their team. I wasn't trying to come in and shake things up a ton in my first year. I'm just trying to serve my role the best I can. And anything that the coach wants to work with me with, I'm willing to work with them. I'm not really necessarily doing my own thing. I want to integrate the weight room into their practice, into their week schedule, into their game days. Um, so yeah, just having those sit downs and kind of, coming up with fun and creative ways that we can collaborate as a strength coach and then a more of a skill specific coach, um, and really make things kind of tie together well. But it was challenging, and for some of these teams, for some of the seniors, I was the third strength coach they've had in their 4 years. And so that's different. And, there's a lot of, I'm sure there was a lot of contradictions to what they've previously learned before that maybe I came in and had different methodologies and ideologies. Once again, I think you just show athletes that you're willing to put in work for them. And I think for the most part, they'll put in the work for you once they see that.
What if for like sports that you aren't weren't familiar to, how did you go about that? Like learning the sport and then knowing how to program for them or what to do.
Yeah.
Like what
So,
are some of the sports where you're like, I haven't even really seen this before?
yeah. So my first one, I was really excited to work with them going into it, but I had never really interacted with the sport was diving. And I didn't know a ton of people that had worked with diving before. But that was one of those situations where I sat down with the coach and I was very honest about that I have little to no experience in the diving world. But I'm like eager to learn about it. And then I also don't think that lack of knowledge about it is going to like hinder what we're doing in the weight room for the first, couple phases. Because we're doing pretty general stuff anyway. But yeah, so he was able to give me a lot of resources to learn kind of about the sport. Um, my coworker had worked at Rutgers previously with the swimming and diving team there, so she was able to provide me with some resources as well to kind of learn about how they run their year and their training. Um, and then throughout the year, just getting to interact and experience like with the athletes and what they were doing. That helped a lot as well. So kind of that first year was very much still learning and developing kind of how I'm going to go about it in this next year. But yeah, just trying to find ways that I can interact with people that know more about it. And then yeah, same thing for the other sports. So for like tennis and esports, I knew people that had worked with them previously, other strength coaches. So I just reached out to them at the beginning of the year, hopped on a Zoom call with them, and just kind of asked things that they found that worked well, anything that I should consider going into it. They were all really helpful there.
You think that was like when you're asking these people about what they did and how they did things, was it what you thought it was going to be, or was it different?
Um,
Like, was it, I guess, was it more specific than you thought it was going to be, or was it more general?
I think it depends on who I talked to. I think I got both sides of that. I talked to the wonderful Zach Lozak about esports because he had worked with them in the past. And yeah, all the stuff he said was pretty general, you know. He honestly kind of gave me the advice of not trying to do too much with them, keep things very general, but just find ways to make the atmosphere more fun and interactive with them. So that was the first team that I started like playing games with before we even started weights. We just kind of mess around for the first 10, 15 minutes for warm-ups, do something different every day, just kind of have some fun. And we jump into some pretty basic movements. I'd leave them some time at the end to do something like cardio related if they wanted, or like arm farm because some of the guys were pretty into that. Or if they wanted to, they could just leave 10 minutes early. But just trying to make that atmosphere as fun and open to them as possible because a lot of them had little to no weight room experience. Um, so that's an example of something that was pretty general. Then going back to the diving spot or the diving example, Rutgers runs a very precise and pretty specific program throughout the year there that tapers around certain competitions, and so that was very specific, and that was a lot to take in at first. And then, of course, if you talk to a sports coach, I feel like you're always going to get very specific wants and desires from them. Um, and so, on that side of things, I think it was about kind of taking in everything, all the information, and then deciding how I can cut it down to the most general system possible, both to make it easy on me and make it easy on my athletes as well. And once again, that was a year of learning and getting a lot of stuff wrong. And I think I have a lot better understanding of how I want to tackle the year and the progressions going into year two. Um, but yeah, it was, I think I got a lot more specific requests and examples out of diving than, once again, in comparison to esports.
I think I've been learning how that's actually really important is to do things that you might not be comfortable with or try different things out. Because one, you can say you did it, like you can say you did it, and then you have the pros and cons of it. Because you can read it in a textbook all you want, but until you actually apply it into a team setting, like nothing you read out of the textbook actually matters. Like I've been looking back at even just my own training I've done on myself, and it's like the new shiny toy that you read about in a textbook, and then you go and try it, and you're like, oh, this is really cool. Like this is the thing that I've been missing in my training. And then like a couple months later, you're like, that wasn't actually all that special or anything. Even like thinking about back to last year with myself with like the reactive drop catches. And at one time I was into like hypertrophy clusters. And then I was into like only isometrics, like only yielding and overcoming. And it's good because I'm glad I did that because I take the pros of all of it and I apply it to my training when needed. But at the end of the day, it's like none of those things work individually. Like none of them work in a program individually. Obvious, obviously, there's times where you can apply them individually, but it's like probably shouldn't be running a triphasic model all year. Like you probably shouldn't have intense plyometrics in all year. Like you probably shouldn't be doing sprint training in all year. But like if you microdose these little things at the right times, they can help. But again, like you can't do that without first trying it, and sometimes it takes you failing to actually learn from it. Um, so as weird as this sounds, like I'm trying to fail more now being young and being like a younger strength coach so that like later on I can have like a holistic model and have my own coaching philosophy based off of the things I've tried before.
Yeah, I think it's really important to be okay with being wrong and failing. Um, Once again, it's something struggled with, and I st continue to struggle with, but a lot in the first semester of being at CSU. Um, I wanted to, kind of get everything right and get all the athletes on my side right away. Um, but that's just unrealistic. And there were a lot of things that, I brought and I was super excited to implement it into training. And then you run it with a team and you're like, wow, this is a shit show. And you get athletes complaining about
Yep.
stuff and telling you how things didn't work for these reasons. And it's just, you gotta be a little bit loose and lax with it and understand it's not the end all be all if you get something wrong. But then also there's a lot to learn from getting stuff wrong, way more than getting.
You hear me?
Yeah, we're back.
Dude,
Um,
my screen was literally flickering. It was like this. But anyways,
uh, okay. I think what I was in the middle of saying is that being wrong is I find 10 times more helpful than being right. Um, I've 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 tried to change my relationship with failing and being wrong a lot. Not where I expect it or want it, but where, I accept it and it's something that, I learn a lot from. And that goes for working with, athletes and then with my own training as well. Something I've been doing a lot lately and did a lot over the year was running things and experimenting things on myself before I apply them to my athletes. A lot of times I'd write a program, I'd go in the next day, and my lift that day would be the program I just wrote, just to make sure it flows all nicely, to make sure I'm not just missing anything by looking at the words on the paper. I find getting to experience it helps me coach it best because I know what the athletes are going to be going for. We're going through, so that's something I've been playing around with a lot. And that's a very fun way of programming for me, is kind of implementing it in my own training as well.
yeah. I think even like recently with the basketball off season for PLU, um, one of the things was like I was doing eccentric training. And I was like, all right, let's make everything eccentric training, like early off season, build tissue tolerance, whatever. And then like I realized after the first week, because I thought it was a great idea, and realized after the first week that this takes way too much time. Like 3 second eccentrics, 4 second eccentrics on every single rep of every single movement in the exercise. And like we're barely getting past what we consider our C tier. And I was like, all right, like something's got to change. And so like things could be written out awesome. You could have this big plan, but until you like logistically go through the session, it might not actually work. And for us, it didn't. And then it's like, how well can you make changes on the fly from there? So it's like from there, I just increased the volume and decreased the sets. And like we're still attacking the same adaptation, but it's just differently. So I don't know, it's funny how you kind of sometimes you learn the hard way. But again, I think that's where it's important for people to say as long as you're chasing the adaptation, you'll be fine. Like don't chase exercises, chase adaptations. Um, that's something that I'm like learning a lot more now. And I don't think athletes understand the logistics that have to go into a program for it to like actually work. Like it's like, yeah, for your bro lift, like you go in and you can like, do 3 sets of 8 of bench press and then like go on to your next movement. Where it's like for us to logistically get through a session, we might need to superset things and we might have to put certain movements in this block. And for really big teams, like you might have to have 3 things in a tier so that everyone's actually doing something. No one's standing around. And you don't really appreciate that until you're in the spot of like actually designing the program.
For sure.
And then for you, I know we've talked about this where it's like you want to do things and then you don't have the room for them. Like it
Yeah,
sounds like you don't have the room to like sprint athletes in your weight room.
Yeah. Well, we don't even, I mean, we don't have boxes to jump on. We don't have, we have 8 racks, and sometimes I have 30 girls in the weight room running different programs. Yeah, you got to get creative with things. Um, I'm curious. I know you maybe haven't done that much programming at TCU yet. But if you have, is it is it different from programming at, like, the PLU gym wasn't bad, but it is limited, where the TCU gym looks like it's literally unlimited. Is it different? Is it more challenging? Is it easier? Even if it's just your own training, like, has had having access to a lot more stuff um, changed how you program at all?
So I haven't done any programming being there other than like programming for myself. And even that was like a crap show once I first got there because there were so many things. It actually made it worse. Like it was like there's too much equipment and too many things that I could do that it made it so it was really hard for me to make a program. Like inside the rack, there's like 8 different types of barbells. Like there's a kabuki squat bar. There's two different types of safety squat bars. There's a 50 pound, 55 pound barbell. Then there's an Olympic barbell. And like there's just all these different things. And it was like, I think the hard thing for me when I'm programming for myself is that I want to do everything. I don't want to use all these different types of equipment, and I want them because you think, oh, I have this other piece of equipment. It's going to allow me to make this adaptation in this one, but I want all of them. So it's like, how can I fit this all in a program? And then I found myself, I was like, right now, I think I just need to settle down and like follow someone else's program, which I think there's a lot of good utility in that, and like doing someone else's program and learning from it. So I'm doing someone else's program right now, and it's very, very simple. And that kind of like took the stress away from that. Um, but I know I've heard talking to some of the other coaches on our staff, for example, like they don't even write they're not even writing their programs for their teams that are coming in the fall now because right now we're re-renovating our Olympic, what we're going to consider our Olympic sports gym, and they have no idea what it's going to look like, and they have no idea what the schedule is going to look like. So like, why do I even need to write a program when I don't even know what the gym's going to look like or who's going to be there at the time? Because there could be 3 teams in the gym at one time. And like now it's like your whole program is not going to work logistically because there's 3 teams in the gym and you might not have access to certain equipment. But I think that's a good thing because then it makes you realize that like I can't do anything more. Like this is the most I can do, and we're still getting adaptation out of it, and it doesn't need to be this for us. Like how much is a chest supported row really going to change from a TRX row? Like what is going to be the big difference between those two? But it makes you appreciate it because it's like we're still doing it, and it kind of almost helps with your program when it's like I only have these resources and I can only use these things. And maybe it doesn't need to be complex. Maybe it just needs to be the simplistic. Like maybe all I need to do is just um, some type of competitive vertical jump with friends instead of doing a seated box jump or an approach jump. You know what I mean? Like, for example, there was a time this last year in the gym where we didn't have access to the boxes for approach jumps. So it's like put chalk on the hands and people did approach jumps, try to touch the highest part of the wall with the chalk and they try to beat it. But it's like it's still the same thing. Like yeah, there's some things that are different, sure. But at the end of the day, like we're still getting the same stimulus. So I think that could also like help your programming at times when you're limited with
Yeah.
resources.
I had a feeling that you were
Or
kind
it's
of
just
going to go that route and talk about that. Because I honestly kind of feel the same way. It is overwhelming sometimes when I go to write a new program for a large team, and it's like, right now I have to worry about all the spacing and what equipment we have. But having just like very bare bones and very basic stuff makes it incredibly simple and relaxing to program because you know, we can only do this much stuff and we're going to make it work. Athletes have made it work with the bare bones for hundreds of years. We don't need anything more.
right.
Um, it's I don't know if it's the right word to use, but it's a very like primal way of programming. It's like we're going to pick up the
Yeah.
barbell, we're going to do 8 different movements with the barbell, and it's, we're gonna change around the sets and reps, but everything's gonna look pretty much the same, and we're just, we're gonna slowly progress through stuff. But yeah, there of course is I wish we had some stuff that we don't have, and
Right.
does the TCU gym sounds fun. When I'm down there at some point, we're gonna have to get in there and play around with a lot of the stuff. But
Oh yeah.
yeah.
It's it's interesting because it can also be, I don't know if this is the right word, but it can also be like a scapegoat for like if an athlete's like, hey, why aren't we doing this? You can just be like, sorry, we don't have the space. Like it's not like you're purposely trying to do it, but it's like, you get those questions from athletes like, why are we doing this? And if it's like we don't have the room and we don't have the resources for it, it's kind of an easy pill to swallow because it's the truth.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, what are some things, what are some ways you've had to like learn how to accommodate the space you're in?
Yeah, the first one is pretty much all the programming I've done my whole life and experienced. You're usually on the racks to start with. You do some sort of movement prep. You go on the racks, you do your squat or your bench press or whatever you're doing on the rack that day. And then you kind of maybe transition into some more free weight stuff at the very end, maybe some higher volume. Having just a couple, 8 racks and sometimes a large team in there. I use track and field for my examples a lot because they were a challenging team, but a fun team. During their season in the spring, they wanted 3 different programs for their distance runners, their sprinters and jumpers, and then their throwers. Um, and so you have, 3 groups, 30 girls in a room running 3 different programs on 8 racks. So you don't always have a rack available for a team or for a program. And so learning kind of how to reorganize programs where they're maybe offset a little bit. So trying to time it up where one team's leaving a rack or one group's leaving a rack while the other's kind of filling in. Um, Finding ways to be okay with having those maybe more main movements towards the end of a lift, just to kind of adapt to the space and the timing of things. Um, I think that was like the biggest thing and the most challenging and something that I mean, I still struggle with, and I'm working on getting them separated for this next year so I don't have to run 3 different programs in one weight session. Um, and then my second one, which it was really fun for me, is just um, finding new ways to chase like certain movements and certain adaptations that of lifts that we can't do in our gym. One thing is like we don't have like a glute ham raise. Um, I don't. It's on a machine, but one of the pads. So I developed a way where you can set the safety bars up at a certain height, put a pad under it, and you can lock your feet into that and lay across a bench, and you can kind of chase that same movement and that same adaptation without the machinery. Um, and playing off that, doing side bends as well and stuff like that. Um, we have no boxes, so kind of coming up with fun jump variations that we can do in a small gym. Finding ways to, elevate surfaces beyond just like a bench, um, which, is a struggle, but something that can be done. And then what were some other examples? Doing some fun kind of like uh more garagey gym stuff where we're going out in the hallway and doing sprints and jumps, by classrooms and stuff. Just kind of fun stuff like that. And I'm not doing that for every team. There's certain athletes that I think respond to all that stuff better. And they have to have a certain comfort level and a certain buy-in to the program, but just kind of finding ways to work around the not so not the best space to do stuff, but we still make it work.
Do you think it's easier or harder to coach intensity because you don't have objective feedback? Like you don't, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Um, well, I want to say harder, but I actually, don't even have that much experience in a spot where I do have, that instant objective feedback. Um, there's certainly stuff I think once again for the jumps. Um, you can get as creative as you want with the jumps, but it's really nice if you have some sort of metric being spat back at you. I wish we had a jump mat that we could just, do some jumps on, even if, it's not the most accurate measure of jump height. It's a number that the athletes can look at and be like, I'm going to beat that number. Same thing for
Mhm.
sprints. And the opportunity, I get to be out in the field with the team doing some speed and agility stuff. Having access to lasers where they can, feed them a number and they can compete with each other a little bit. Um, I think that's a great way to, chase, run faster and get faster. And once again, you can put in certain constraints where, they're still competing, they're being chased by somebody, they're doing some sort of relay variation of running, but still think the best way to kind of track all that stuff is to have that objective feedback. So I definitely do wish we had it, but it's by no means an end all be all. There's always ways around it.
Yeah. It's kind of like a blessing in disguise to be able to be creative with those things because then you can carry it on to other things that you do. Um, like you said, like not having glute ham raise has made you have to be creative with finding different ways to hit the same thing. I I, I think that's I think it's also cool because then you can just share it with other people. You'd be like, oh, like I literally would have never thought about that.
Yeah.
Uh,
And that happens. I mean, going back to that same example, my coworker caught me doing it myself in my own program. She's like, "Oh, that's a really good idea." She's like, "I want to start using that," and it's something that I've seen her
mhm.
use. And then by the same means, I've watched some of her sessions where she has a unique setup to be able to get something. A big one was that I just didn't think we could really do in our space was anything like landmine oriented because the floor is really slick and uh, we don't have like plates that really fit well to just like put the end in the plate. Um, but I guess she had developed a way of using a corner of the rack where it works really well. Um, I've seen athletes come up with stuff where once again we have a really slick floor where benches usually slide a lot. So like hip thrusts, you kind of have to push the bench up against a wall, and then your head kind of hits the wall. It's just not the best setup. Um, my athletes came up with a way where you kind of wedge it in between the racks, and the bench doesn't slide, and you have a lot of space behind your head. So yeah, just like it's really fun to kind of see what other people come up with, even if you don't see it at first in your head, and then you get to try it out and then, expand upon it and be like, what else can I do with this setup?
Yeah. Sometimes I found myself where I was doing things and I was like, it's like, okay, I went too far. It's like
Oh,
now I'm just trying to like do something completely, um, just completely like it was too, I was trying to reinvent the wheel and I
oh
was
yeah.
like,
I
all
think I
right,
talked to you for a little bit about trying to progress like Copenhagen's and I started like going on the safety bar. Um And then so I'd like, so I could move it up and get like a huge range of motion and huge stretch. And then recently I just realized it's turned into just something so blown out of proportion where I'm like upside down and it's like, my hips not even getting close to the ground anymore. Like we're not even doing a Copenhagen anymore. But it was fun while it lasted to try to progress that. But I'm just back to doing it on a bench because you can just add a weight to your hip and kind of get the same effect that I was chasing before. But yeah. Once again, that's one of those
I
situations that
did
we were
that
talking
with,
about earlier where it's like, you know, you might be wrong for the right reasons, but you're still wrong about something, but it's something you just learn from and you have a laugh about after.
yeah, I think actually it happened to me this last year where I was doing like half kneeling landmine throws. I was like throwing the barbell and having someone else catch it. And then Bryce Kreider swiped up and was like, just throw a med ball. I was like, well, yeah, that's a good idea. But I mean, like if you ever have a gym that you don't have med balls at, you throw a landmine. Um, yeah, it's another tool you have in the toolbox, but it doesn't always go out to plan. Then
It's
you
always not a
realize
help.
that
It's
like,
not always a helpful tool.
yeah, it's just a cycle of like, I'm gonna try something new. This didn't do what I wanted to. Someone tells you something, or you see something that's more simple that just brings you back to the simple thing, and you think it's too simple, so you try something. It's just like a cycle.
Yeah.
But again, doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it kind of relates. I remember last summer you talked about day camp, kind of talking about like the basics, being like it always kind of comes back to the basics. Like they work, they're effective, so you don't really need to change too far off of those. I think it kind of relates back to that, where like we have these very basic examples of these main lifts, and they're popular and they've been used for a long time because they're easy to implement and they work. And you don't always need to stray too far away from those. You can write a fantastic program and get a lot of work done with the most bare bones equipment and program.
Yeah, I watched like Will Rattel's Instagram, and like he's just training people out of his garage. Like literally, like this dude has thousands of followers and is a very respected strength coach. He worked in college strength and conditioning, and here he is just training people. And he's usually like jumps, front squat, single leg RDL, and it's like the most basic stuff, and he still gets it done. Um, but yeah, again, like one of the things he's talked about is for him that it came back to the basics. Like he did all the drop catches and all. He's tried triphasic and he's done all that stuff, but it doesn't mean that you should stay away from trying stuff. Like still, you should still try it out because you might get an athlete every once in a while where you do want to test it out with them. You might have smaller groups. You might go into the private sector where you're able to do that stuff. You can always create programs for it and not have to like give it to people. But yeah, that's one of the things where I also think it just depends on the level of athlete. Like if you have someone who's very, very skilled at their sport, then yeah, all they need is the basics. Like they need the most general prep because they're very good at their skill. And then I don't mean this in the wrong way, but there's sometimes athletes who aren't as skilled where it's like you try to make up for the lack of other things. Kind of like we're talking about the games earlier. Like you play games to make up for a lack of self-organization because they only played one sport growing up. Um, so yeah, I think those means can be used, those more exploratory means can be used with maybe like lesser skilled athletes, but I think it also depends with like who you're working with. If you're working with very skilled people, they really don't need anything crazy. And we saw that at Driveline.
Yeah,
We saw that literally like the some of the programs that people got the most gains on were very simple.
yeah. I mean, that's how I feel about myself and my own training. It's like I squat a couple times a week, once a week, heavy. Do the same thing, a lower body pull, upper body push, upper body pull, just keep everything really basic and like generally that's where I see the most gains and the most happen. Um, so when I try to get fancy with it, and I try to think of like, oh, what are ways we can rearrange this to get more optimized? It's like you just kind of lose that uh why it worked in the first place.
Yeah.
Um, I guess like last thing we can kind of finish with here, I think we kind of skipped over it at the beginning. But over the last year, is there any like certifications or any events you've been to that have thought has been really worthwhile and helpful? And then on the flip side, is there anything that you've kind of been to, experienced that you didn't really deem worth it, or you didn't like certain aspects of it?
Um, let's see. It's been a while. I mean, just being able to program for a contact team sport like basketball has been really good, especially because like it's a very long season and it's just a different type of like stress that the athletes are going under compared to maybe like again maybe like an endurance sport or a non-contact sport. Um, Other than that, going and visiting schools and visiting different coaches and just networking and talking to them has been really good. Um, Again, like especially because it doesn't take much, especially nowadays with like social media, you can literally just like send a DM. Um, it's like a couple weeks ago, I went down to Texas and talked to their baseball strength coach and got to see what they were doing. And literally all it took was like one message and talked about a lot of stuff. Again, seeing how other people do things and what has worked for them, and then like using that on your own. Also went to the Coach 'em Up podcast, which was cool because Coach Losack was there, my old boss, and then Charlie Pratt, who um, worked at PLU, also was there. So it's kind of like a nice little reunion when we were there. The same thing, like being able to network with people and meet people that you talk with on social media is really cool. Um, and then just being like in a big part of it was being in the presence of people who like do the same thing that you do and like care about the same things that you care about. And it was also cool because like a lot of the people there were like my age. It wasn't like a bunch of I've been doing NSCA event and it wasn't just like nothing against old people, but it wasn't a bunch of old people. I don't know. It was like people who like talk like me and work out the same like me. Like you walk into the gym and like people are doing plyos and jumps and people are sprinting down the turf and like people are doing Zercher squats. It's almost like people are doing the things that are like I guess you call trendy right now. And that was really cool. And then just listening to presentations about things that, I like listening about. The Coach 'em Up podcast is like my favorite podcast. And it's because Tim Riley makes it very enthusiastic and very, um, just like very laid back and casual. Like he doesn't try to make it too like professional or anything. It's literally just dudes being dudes and like talking and having fun conversation and they're cussing and have jokes and telling stories. But it makes it a lot more easier to listen to than just like a monotone professional podcast. So that was really cool to be a part of and get to go to. Other than that, just like online conferences, like the Baseball Performance Summit and those things. It's cool because it's easy to do. Like you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to pay for a hotel and travel. You can just sign in and listen to people's presentations. And you can listen to it like on 1.5 or 2x speed. And you can almost make it like a podcast and just go in the car and press play on your phone, and listen to it. What about you?
Um, yeah, I mean, kind of talking about those the old men conference things. I was at the CSCCA conference in Indianapolis at the end of the spring. Um, and it was a cool event, but it did definitely just felt like kind of an ego fest. A lot of, older coaches that have been around just going to hang out with their old friends and then also just kind of flex the muscles and show how many letters are at the end of their name. Um, so yeah, it was weird. It didn't really seem like a big like learning event like I thought it would be. Um, some of the talks were cool. I tried to go to as many as I could. Some of the presentations were all right, but I think for the most part they were just kind of very general, very basic. Not really anything too profound there. Um, the exam was something else. Um, I passed, but it was not the most enjoyable thing. And I think it's just, maybe something I don't have a lot of experience with, but also just like I don't see much benefit on being able to coach a bench press on the floor with a dowel. It's like I don't really get how that applies and says that I'm a good strength coach by any means. So it's a cool certification to have, but like most certifications, I don't really think it means anything aside from it gives me the ability to do certain stuff. Um, yeah, I think something I've been enjoying over the last, couple months is listening to podcasts, and then my other big one is a goal of mine has been to start reading more, and so I've started tackling the Kreider performance reading list. which has been
Oh
fun. So
yeah.
I finished Kitchen Confidential, which I know we listened to a lot of it on audiobook, but I read it, and it was fantastic. I'm starting on Anti-Fragile right now, which is interesting, but it's very wordy and it's a bit confusing. It's
Mm.
very philosophical, but I've been enjoying it. And then my next read is the Inner Game of Tennis, which I've been recommended by
Oh
a lot
yeah.
of people. So, but yeah, just getting to read stuff that is is a interesting, people that are very good at writing and very good at the craft, and then doesn't necessarily have to do 100% with what I'm doing, but has a lot of takeaways that you can apply. Um, that's nice because reading it doesn't just feel like part of the job or like schoolwork. It's a bit more enjoyable getting to hear stories about Anthony Bourdain in the kitchen. But then there's a lot of
Yeah.
lessons that you can kind of pull out of it. Um, so those are kind of been my main things of my continuing ed this summer. But yeah, just excited for the opportunity to do more stuff. I've got the CSCS and the SCCC now, so I think I'm good on certifications. So I can kind of, you know, stop just study. I can not just study for exams now, and I can get a little bit more into the weeds and maybe interact with some stuff a bit more.
Oh yeah.
Soon you'll have them too.
I know. Soon. What, a month? Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else that you have for the good of the order?
I mean, probably just last thing is kind of what we talked about before we started is our goal is to have more people on. Um, just have like more conversations. So it's just not Rowan and I talking with each other because we're freaking 23 years old. We don't know shit. But
Well, we
having
also
more
know each
people
other
on,
too well.
yeah, exactly. Um, having other people on, interviewing them, talking stuff, and yeah, hopefully they'll make it more entertaining. And yeah,
Yeah.
probably anything else.
No, I think yeah. I think it'll be fun to commit to a schedule here, and then like all things, consistency uh is the best thing for growth. I don't think we're the
Yep.
the, the best podcasters yet, but we talk about
We still
people
have to
like
make it to 21 episodes.
I know 21
Is that
episodes.
what it is? 21?
Yeah. But yeah, you once again though we talk about people like Tim Riley and other people that are have good podcasts and they have a scale and they've developed that over time. Um,
Right.
so yeah, it's not really about how many people are listening right now, but just keep having the conversations and keep getting better at asking questions and organizing thoughts is kind of the big thing. So staying consistent here every Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, we've made it public now, so we have to hold up to it.
I also got to make it public then that I'm gonna dunk by the end of the summer.
Oh gosh. See, I tried to make that a goal, and then like once finals week hit, there's like a couple workouts I couldn't do, and then I just got patella tendonitis again. So that freaking sucks.
I made
Because
a
now, so I think this week is just going to be ISO week. I think it's just going to be only ISOs, no impact, recover, and then I might be doing Blaine McConnell's. I think it's 12-week sprint program. I think
Ooh,
it's called summer sprinting. So I don't know.
that's fun.
Maybe that's something I'll do. Maybe if my tendons, if I don't pull something, I was literally doing sprints on Friday, and I felt like a slight pull in my Achilles, and I was like, I have never felt it, and I
I
don't
see
want to ever feel it again.
Suraj like just posted about that. It's like when you're sprinting and you feel
Who
something in
did?
your Achilles and it's like a horse and it's like it's like time to put those
Yeah,
away.
it was like it didn't feel like it was gonna snap or anything. Like it doesn't feel fragile, but it was just like a weird little like it's almost like when you get shocked by someone, like a little static. Like it's like it didn't cause any pain. It was just like, oh, that was there.
Well, we can track this week by week now. Look, it could
Yeah.
be a segment. How's Anthony's Achilles doing?
One day I'll be doing a podcast from like the hospital room before my surgery. Like, but that's not gonna happen.
Um, All right. Well, let's stop this recording. Stay on the call afterwards because I actually want to talk to you about some stuff. We don't have to have it be part of the episode. So.
All right.
All right, everyone. Have a good one. See you next week.